First 3.5 years, it will be relative peace. Israel basically has been a target and will continue to be a target. And especially as they continue in their research and their findings, their wealth is going to grow, their worth is going to grow. Other nations in the world are going to say, hey, we want what they have. We want to go take it. But they're going to be unsuccessful. And that's why there's so many problems. I know we were living in East Africa in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It wasn't so much that people were fighting each other just to fight. It was basically who's fighting to have control of the resources that are in that country. And that's a constant, still going on. It's constant. Because there's so many vast natural resources in that country. And so, basically, Israel is going to be a target. But it's not going to happen. The countries are going to come in. They're going to be defeated because God is going to defeat them. And then the Antichrist, who has been there, who has signed a peace pact with Israel saying, I'll protect you. For 3.5 years it looks good. And then after these countries try to attack, God takes them out. Then the Antichrist is going to show his true colors. And he's going to come into Jerusalem, set up an image of himself in the temple. He's going to make the world basically worship him. Because all he wants is power and worship. And then we're going to go on through that time. We aren't, because we're not going to be here. The church won't be here. And then at the end of that time, there'll be a great battle. They'll all be defeated. Antichrist will be defeated. And then Jesus will come back. That's what we call the second coming, when he will literally touch back down on earth. Remember when he left, he ascended. The disciples sitting there watching him. He went up into the clouds. The angel said, hey, what you looking at? There he goes. And the clouds come and they lose him in the clouds. And the angel said, just as he left, he's coming back. And that time, the second time, he's going to come back, touch down on earth. That is the second coming, and he will establish his 1,000-year millennial kingdom. Now we know that because we got the book. We got the rest of it. But what we're looking at today in Matthew 24:25 is Jesus was talking to his disciples. Now, in chapter 24 of Matthew, they were at the temple. And they were going out of the temple complex. And the disciples came up and they said, man, look at this place. This is great, isn't it? They said, this is magnificent. And basically, Herod started working on the temple in about 20 BC. Now, Herod, looking at himself as the king in that place, he started expanding the temple, the courtyards, the areas. He started bringing in white marble. And they had stones that were quarried. Some of these stones were 40 feet long, 12 feet wide, and 12 feet high. Hand quarried and brought in as part of this construction. And on the eastern wall, there were plates of gold. And so when the sun rose, all you saw was this bright light on the eastern wall of the temple. There it is. And so it was pretty magnificent, really big, expanded out, probably one of the most man-made wonders in the world at that time. And the disciples said, man, look at all this. Now, you remember their concept of Jesus and Messiah? You're going to boot the Romans out, and we're going to set up camp here. We're going to say, and maybe this will be the capital, and we're going to be in on this. But as they looked at it, Jesus looked at the temple, and he said, this is what's going to happen. One stone will not be left on top of another. This will be destroyed. Say, what? What do you mean, destroyed? Man, look at this place. He said it's going to be destroyed. And that's what's going to happen. And they were incredulous. They go, what do you mean? What's going on here? And he was talking about approximately 40 years from that time, Rome. Now, Herod was still building on the temple and all this complex even after Jesus was killed and resurrected. But Rome came in and destroyed it. They set up ramparts. They got it all done. They basically set it on fire. The fire was so intense, stones broke, they fell down. The gold ornamentation in the stones, although basically melted, they tore the stones apart to get the gold that was melted. And so the temple was destroyed. It was a pretty big place. And y'all know the tallest building in the world right now? No, we're waiting for you to tell us. Huh? It's close. There were a lot of churches, cathedrals, back in the 13, 14, 15, 1600s that were pretty tall. Some 300, 400, 500 feet high, the cathedrals. And some of these, they built them tall, and guess what happened? The steeples collapsed. Not a good thing. But the tallest building in the world right now is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. It is 2,716 feet high. I know for a fact my wife will not go in that building. Anything over 3 stories, and that's it. I mean, we went to Chicago to the John Hancock building. And they have an observation deck, and we went up there, and she stayed against the wall. I ain't going down over there. I'm not going down there. But there are a lot of tall buildings. Now, basically, the tallest residential building is in Dubai also, the Princess Towers. The tallest hotel is in Dubai, 1,166 feet. You have 2 towers in Malaysia that are the tallest in the world right now. But guess who's building towers bigger? I guess somebody in Dubai. Yeah, that's right. In Dubai, they're building bigger towers. All right, y'all know this one, the largest mud building in the world. No, not Dubai. Not Dubai. It's in Mali. It is a mosque built out of mud. 328 feet long and 131 feet wide. That's pretty big for a mud structure. All right, here's one you really need to know. What is the heaviest building in the world? Now, how in the world, Guinness just assumes this. The heaviest building in the world is the Palace of the Parliament in Bucharest, Romania. It's constructed from 1.5 billion pounds of steel and bronze, combined with 35.3 million cubic feet of marble, 7.7 million pounds of crystal glass, and 31.7 million cubic feet of wood. They said it cost $3.76 billion to build. Now, I'm not sure how Guinness figured that out. I guess they're just guessing from materials that it's the heaviest. I'd like to see the scale. All right, we're going to weigh this building right here, see how heavy it is. But anyway, so the disciples, pretty awesome. You know, they said, wait a minute, Jesus, what's going on? What are you talking about? And he said, no. He said, all these stones are going to be torn down. And here's what's happening. By the way, do you know what the tallest, I was looking this up today, the tallest building in Charleston is? You know, they still have that construction rule that you cannot build higher than the tallest steeple in Charleston. Huh? No, that's not quite. The tallest building in Charleston. I know I've stood on top of parking garages and looked out. It's pretty neat to see still the steeples. The St. Matthew's Lutheran Church. Y'all know where that is? On Marion Square. That is the tallest church in Charleston, 255 feet tall. But then you have Citadel Square, which is 210. That's the second one. And then it goes down. St. Philip's, St. Michael's, Cathedral of St. John's. You know, all these churches, they're tall. And so, but they're also thinking about revising that a little bit because now we're talking about flooding and things, so buildings might have to be built 6 feet, a little bit 6 feet higher. So some of the tops of the buildings might get real close or surpass it a little bit. But anyway, so Jesus talking about the end of the times. He's talking about the beginning of the tribulation. Because the disciples wanted to know. How many people have asked the question, all right, when is Jesus coming back? What's the day? What's the time? I want a time, like it's July 17, 2022 at noon, Jesus is coming back. That is not true, okay? Do not tell people I said that. saying that that's true. But people, the disciples, wanted to know what's going on, when's this going to happen, what are some things we can look for to be ready for this. And so Jesus said, all right, you have to be careful. Basically, at the beginning of the tribulation, basically, be careful that no one deceives you. A lot of people are going to come in my name saying, I'm the Messiah, or they'll say, oh, the Messiah's over here or there. He said you're going to have wars, rumors of wars. Nations are going to rise up against nations. I was reading right from Matthew 24. You're going to have earthquakes, famines. All of these things are going to be happening. But he said these are just the beginnings of these things. Basically, like he says, the beginning of birth pangs or birth pains. Ladies, if you've ever had a child, you know where you got the beginning time, right? They say, I don't want to remember that. But you start, have little this and that, and you said, And so Jesus is saying, all right, this is what's going to happen. Basically, these are the beginnings. And he said, then there's going to be persecutions. Basically, they're going to hand you over to nations. Many will be hated because of my name. People are going to betray one another. People who pretend to be Christians are going to betray the people who really are the Christians. And they're going to say, hey, there's some Christians over there. They're going to betray other people. Turn them over to the authorities. False prophets are going to rise up. Lawlessness will begin to multiply. And basically what's going to happen is you're going to see a falling away. The love of many are going to grow cold. They say that, no, I'm not going to suffer this stuff. No, I don't want anything to do with it. Jesus is saying, here's some of it. He said, basically, but one who endures to the end will be delivered. In other words, the true Christians are going to stay true until the end. And basically, the good news of the kingdom is going to be proclaimed. And then the end will come. So then, that's the beginning of the tribulation, the beginning of those problems. And then you're going to get into the mid-tribulation where I talked about, where the Antichrist. Basically, you're going to have these wars. The Antichrist is going to come in. Everything's done. But he's going to set up his statue in the temple. And he wants everybody to worship him. And Jesus, right there in verse 15, he says, so when you see the abomination of death that causes desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place. Jesus was reaffirming, there's Daniel. He talked about this in his book. That was the prophecy. Here's what you'll see. Jesus reaffirming that it's true. He says, here we go. When this happens, he's saying, if you're on the top of a house, you don't need to come down. You just need to get out. If you're in a field, don't run back to the house to get something. He's saying, oh man, if you're pregnant or nursing a child, pray that you're not. Pray that it's not winter. Because basically he's talking specifically to the Jews, get out of Dodge. Get out. Because when you see this happen, this is going to be bad. And basically he said, unless these days were limited, he said no one would survive. But those days will be limited because of the elect, the chosen ones who are faithful. And he's saying, be careful. He said people will try to deceive you. Oh, the Messiah's over here. Oh, over here, over here, over there. Trying to draw them out, to capture them, especially the true believers. And finally, after this 3.5 years, the last 3.5 years, he says in verse 27, for as the lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. Any of y'all sit out and watch the storm? Any of y'all sit out and watch the lightning? And maybe y'all say, okay, lightning's going to be right there. It's going to come down. Or, no, over there. It's going to go here. Now maybe y'all can do that. I don't think so. You can watch it, right? But you can't say it. You can't point the exact place. And that's what Jesus said. My coming is going to be like that. As lightning goes from east to west, that's how I'm going to come. It's like one moment, nothing. Next moment, there he is. Boom. And then he said, after those days, and he's talking about the end of that 3.5 years, he said, you talk about global warming, here's what's going to happen at the end of that time. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not shed its light, the stars will fall from the sky, the celestial powers will be shaken. And the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man in the air coming down. And he's going to send his angels out when he comes at that second time. And his angels are going to gather. One Bible says, I like this, he's going to send his angels out, Randy, with a shofar. And he's going to gather the people, the believers, from the four corners of the earth. The believers. To usher them into the millennial kingdom. Now Jesus gives a parable of the fig tree. He says, you see the fig tree? The leaves are coming on. You know, summer's close. It's going to be fruit. There's a sign of it. You've got to watch this. And he's saying, this generation, the generation where it's happening at that time, will not pass until all those things are fulfilled. He said, this is what's going to happen. He says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Now, he said, no one knows the hour or the day when it's going to come. He said, only the Father knows that. Over time, there's been people that have said Jesus is coming back at this point in time. I was an associate pastor in Ohio. I received a book in the mail, 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back in 1988. Literally got the book. And I said, I need to read this. What year is this? 2019. Of course, the guy had an out. He had it in the back of the book. He said, no, it doesn't happen here. He had an out. He had an explanation. In 2011, we were here for about 3 months. Walked into the credit union where we bank. And the young lady in there, Jennifer, she said, oh, there's Dan. Ask him. I didn't do it. What do you want to ask me? At that point in time, there was a gentleman in California that had predicted that Jesus was coming back certain time right in there. And so she, asked me, and I said, well, and I told her what Jesus said here. Nobody knows except the Father. I mean, people can talk about it, but nobody knows. But basically, what Jesus is talking about is you need to be ready. And he goes on, he talks about faithful servants, and then he talks about weddings and virgins and money and investments. He talks about the faithful servant. The master leaves the servant in charge. And, he knows the master's coming back, so if the servant is faithful, he treats everybody well. But then there's another one who's an unfaithful servant. He doesn't treat everyone well, but the master does return. And the master says, hey, why'd you do this? And he boots him out. And then he also talks about the parable of the 10 virgins. They had a wedding feast. And basically what they did was the groom would leave his house and go to the house of the bride, pick her up, and basically come back with her to his house. That was kind of the finalization of the wedding celebration and ceremony. Well, basically they were escorted back to their house. These 10 virgins, these 10 women, had oil lamps. 5 of them brought extra oil because they didn't know the exact time, and 5 did not. And basically they all waited, and then finally they said, oh, hey, the bride and groom's coming. And the ones that had the extra oil, they were ready, had their lamps. The ones who didn't bring extra said, sorry, help us, please, can you give us some more? And no way, I don't have enough. Go to the guy and buy some and come back. And so they went out, came back, but the ones that had the lamps had entered into the wedding feast, the ceremonies there, boom, door was closed, and they could not get in. That was it. And basically, Jesus talking about people who are unbelievers. They heard about it, they thought about it, but they didn't really act on it. Then he talks about basically the parable of the talents. He's not talking about things you can do. He's actually talking about money here. And then, the 3 guys, the master's leaving. He says, here's some money. Here's some talents. And I'm going to give you 5. I'm going to give you 2. And I'm going to give you 1. Now, I'm going away. Now, I want you to take this, and I want you to at least get some kind of return on it, because I'm coming back. Well, if you know the story, the guy had the 5. Now, some people said that 1 talent could be worth about 20 years' wages during that time. It's no small amount of money. So the guy had 5, he invested it, got 5 more. The guy who had 2 talents, He invested that, and he got 2. And the guy who got 1, he went to the movies. Bought some popcorn and, no. He basically took it and buried it in the backyard. And I hope he marked it well. Because the guy did come back. And the master came and he said, hey. He said, all right, want a report. So the guy that had 5 said, you gave me 5, you got 5 more, 10. Here you go. Well done. Good and faithful servant. Enter to the joy of the Lord. Enter to the joy. 2, the guy said, hey, you gave me 2, I made 2 more, 4, here you go. He said, well done, well done. All right, Barney, what you got? Well, you gave me 1, and I know what kind of a guy you are. Now, really what he was reflecting is himself on his master. His master was really not like what he said. Well, you sow where you try and get places where you didn't plant, you try and get things. I know how mean, I know you're Mr. Scrooge. And that wasn't even written yet. But he said, oh, you're like Mr. Scrooge. So what I did was, I took that and buried it in the backyard. Here you go. I even cleaned it for you. It's all clean. And what did you think the master said? Man, Barney, and he kind of slapped him in the head. He said, why at least didn't you take this money and put it in a CD account or, somewhere, a money market, where it could get some interest? All you did was bring me back what I gave you. He goes, get out of here. I don't want to talk to you. You're not a good servant. So he did. So he was gone. And basically, what's happening there is that we need to, all these stories, we need to be ready. The master left, but he came back. We need to be ready. And then with the talents, basically, God gives us gifts. He gives each of us something. We need to invest those things in what God wants us to invest in. Now, we may only have 1, some 2, some 5. But each of us has something that we can invest in the kingdom of God. So when we stand before Jesus Christ one day, we can say, hey, you gave me 1, but this is what I did with it. I tried to do the best, and here you go. Doesn't look like much, but thank you. And Jesus is going to say, hey, you did good. Well done. 2, same thing. 5, something. Now, some people might be given 5, and they'll say, I'm going to put it. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to put it away. Don't do that. Because God gives you an opportunity to serve Him and use what you have. Now, God knows that you might not be a person that can handle 5. Now, He won't give you, if you're a 1, He won't give you 5 because that'll just be overwhelming. What if today you went and looked at your bank account statement and each of you have $45 million in your bank account? You would tithe. I like that answer.
Yes.
Now, for some people, and I'm sure you've read stories about that people who come from backgrounds, you hear stories about professional athletes. Some of them come from very tough backgrounds, and all of a sudden they have a lot of money, and they can't handle it. They blow it. Lottery winners, you heard about those. Stories. Some people take it and invest it. Others, they're as poor after they've won as before because they do. I read a story the other day. Remember the lady in South Carolina, I think around Simpsonville, she won that mega thing. She won $816 million. You know what her taxes were in the state of South Carolina? $62 million. Yes. But you know what the state of South Carolina is going to do? They're going to send a check for $50 to people who pay taxes in South Carolina. Now, there's some guidelines, but all the money that she paid, they're actually going to send, and basically these people are going to get $50 checks, but there are some guidelines. So, some people can handle it, some people can't. But God has given you what you can handle, use it for Him. Use it for Him. And some people say, Jesus, You know, we've heard that for 2,000 years. God's not finished with Israel. The Old Testament prophecies have been fulfilled. God is going to judge the world, and Jesus is coming back. No matter what your prophetic view is, He's coming back. Be ready. Be alert. Don't waste your time on other things, but serve Jesus Christ. December 7th, 1941. Remember that date? No? Anybody's birthday? President Roosevelt called it a day of infamy that would live forever in the minds of Americans. Pearl Harbor. All right, Japanese making advances in the Pacific. Anybody know March 11th, 1942? Come on. Y'all don't know that one? That's the day that the Japanese, they were headed toward Bataan and Corregidor and the Philippines. And by presidential order, General Douglas MacArthur was ordered to evacuate the Philippines because they were afraid he would be captured. He was a very valuable commander. So he left. Like I said, by presidential order. But you remember the words that he said? I shall return. That's what he said. And so he was sent to Australia to see, basically he was tasked with defending Australia from the Japanese. He found out he wanted to go back to Corregidor, go back to Bataan, go back to the Philippines, but he couldn't. There weren't as many U.S. troops in Australia as he thought there were. So here he was. And so he basically got a plan, and he kept working with the higher-ups, working. And you remember this date? October 20th, 1944. What happened? Can you guess? General MacArthur returned to the Philippines. He did come back. And he kept telling him, I am coming back, all through those 2 years. But I like what he said at the end. When he finally came back, he said, I'm a little late, but we finally came. I'm a little late, but we finally came. All right. Be prepared for what the Lord is doing. Be with Him as He does this. Now, we're going to go now. We're going to celebrate the Lord's Supper. This is a time when we remember who Jesus Christ is and what He did for us. So as the deacons come, y'all just still be seated, but the deacons will come. And as we say, be prepared, be ready. This is what we're going to do. Jesus is coming back. But this is a time where we remember who He is, what He did for us, and that He is coming back, because He said, do this in remembrance of me until I return. So that's what He's asking us to do, and that's what we're doing today. This bread that we use reminds us of the body of Jesus Christ. He went to the cross for us voluntarily. No one made Him do this. But He went for us to pay the penalty for our sin so that we can be basically reconciled, brought back into a right relationship with God through what He did for us. So let's pray. Father, I thank You so much for who You are and what You're doing. Jesus, I thank You for the sacrifice You made for us so that we can be brought back into a right relationship with Father. Thank You for Your sacrifice through the body that was put on that cross for us. In Your name I pray. body of Jesus Christ, who's put on the cross for us. Let's take it. This cup represents the blood of Jesus Christ. When he was crucified for us, he shed his blood, which satisfied God, the punishment for sin, basically so that we could have salvation through the blood shed for us on the cross. So let's pray. Thank you so much, Jesus, for shedding your blood on the cross, suffering the most terrible death. Thank you that after that, buried, but after that, resurrection, alive again. And thank you that we have that hope as we believe in you, trust in you. We have that hope of resurrection also. And thank you for making that possible for all of us who believe. In your name I pray.